Okay, thanks everyone. Hope you had an enjoyable break. That's just a nice beer, there's not drunk. There'll be another opportunity at the end. So many people know Christopher Snowdon, he blogs at Golden Glove Iron Fist, wrote a book of the same name. He's going to come and talk about, a surprising source of cost. So it's a surprising source that, personally, I didn't think that this was something that was a major issue in terms of the cost of living. But I've been corrected on that. So, Chris, do you want to explain how serious is the taxation of sin tax, not to confuse any programmers? How bad is it?
It's worse than it's ever been before. The British state spends more than 6 times what it did after the Second World War in real terms, and it is nowhere near able to gather that kind of revenue by taxing the rich, or even just by taxing people who even have a job. It has to do it in very sneaky ways, using indirect taxes. And the burden of indirect taxes, in particular on the traditional favourites, alcohol and tobacco, but also various green taxes, and also, of course, VAT, which has gone from 8% to 15% to 79% to 20% now, has been extremely regressive and oppressive. I won't bore you with figures, but in 1977, the poorest 20% of the population were spending 22% of their income on indirect taxes. That has since risen to 30% of their income. For the richest quintile, it was 20%, it's fallen to 15%. So we're seeing an increasingly regressive aspect to that. Now, in absolute terms, everybody's paying a hell of a lot more in indirect taxes. They've snuck up and up and up. During the good times, it's relatively easy to justify various indirect taxes on the basis that we need to save the environment or we need to improve public health, and so long as living standards are improving, so long as the economy is growing, you can just about get away with that. But when the economy goes backwards, as it obviously has done in the last 6 years, suddenly you see the problem. And it is really, it's government intervention, it's government taxation that is caused the cost of living problem in the first place, as previous speakers have already said. And sin taxes and indirect taxes are a very big part of it. If you are in the bottom 20% of the income bracket and you drive a car, a moderate amount, and even the poorest 20% of people, half of them have a car. It's only really London that's anomalous in this way. If you drink within the government's extremely meagre guidelines, and if you smoke an average amount, you will be spending 37% of your disposable income on indirect taxes. Not on the products, just the taxes on these products. That's your VAT, your alcohol duty, your tobacco duty, your fuel duty. There is an urgent need to slash it. I have suggested that they should all be halved. Tobacco tax should be halved, alcohol tax should be halved, petrol, diesel tax should be halved. VAT should return to 15%. It was a good thing that Labour tried to do that. They did it for the wrong reason. They were trying to boost consumption rather than improve the cost of living, but now would be a very good time to do that. VAT and fuel increase the cost of everything. It's inevitably inflationary, and so if you want to reduce the cost of living, you should start with taxes.
So I think I heard 37% of disposable income. So they've been taxed already, and then 37% of what's left. The poorest 20% is taxed.
If they drive, smoke, and drink.
So. Ian, the left must be up in arms, surely.
I never know quite how to respond when you keep on looking at me with a social democrat. There are many issues in which I am looking at. I'd say this is unfortunately not one of them. Chris and I are in agreement on this one.
Good. You are standing, remember, and I know whether he was up in arms and he was not.
Right. The thrust of actually what you're saying, I mean, I don't accept this idea of how much spending versus how much we're getting that we can't do it by taxing the rich. I don't agree with that. The sin tax is absolutely has proved a very poisonous cultural trait. And it's done that in, I think I'd say through 2 fundamental things. Firstly, firstly, it's expected. And it's a very terrible thing to have anything that's expected in an annual budget, because it basically means there'll be no scrutiny of it. We now know that at each budget as it comes in, we will see a rise in the cost of these products. But the second one I think is much more concerning, and that's that something has happened in this country, that we have adopted a moralistic attitude towards people, that we have started to look at health and at life not as something that should be had intensely and possibly for a short time, but as something that can be assessed by how long it goes on for, regardless of the quality of the life itself. And that is an extremely authoritarian, toxic approach towards this issue. You see it even today with the discussion that you should be charged when you go to visit your doctor if you're a smoker or a drinker. The truth is actually you don't really need to put any taxes on cigarettes. Smokers pay for themselves in the NHS, and they do this by virtue of the fact that they often, about 50% of them, die before the point in their life where they start costing the state an awful lot of money. Smoking is not something that kills you when you're 30. It tends to kill you, if it kills you at all, when you're about sort of 60. So you get all of your working life in there when you contribute to the state, and actually you tend to kill yourself just before you would be taking money away from it. So actually it's a very good thing.
It's a good thing for the economy, or it's a good thing for the treasury?
I take this thing. So, I mean, just from that, I would really, again, I think if we're really trying to find what is going on with the cost of living, this is not the area that we need to find. But the overwhelming majority of what you said.
Wow. Yarrow, presumably you're supportive of taxation of cigarettes and alcohol, because these things are bad for you, and a rationally self-interested person shouldn't be indulging in these things, no? Explain.
How does alcohol become a sin? I don't get that. No, you know, the state, your neighbor, this so-called society, has no role in telling me how to live my life and what to do. Yeah, I think it's stupid to smoke. I think it's self-destructive, it's stupid, but that's your problem, not mine. The problem here is, you know, the comment we just heard. Why are we becoming authoritarian around these issues? Why do I now do? Actually, I started to care about people, you know, consuming bad food and so on. Because as healthcare becomes more socialized, your health becomes an issue for me. If you're unhealthy and I'm healthy, I'm subsidizing your unhealthy behavior. And therefore I demand, you know, that we have a food pyramid. And it becomes relevant to me, it becomes relevant to my life. The only way to make it not relevant, the only way to step back from this authoritarian view of health is to make people suffer the consequences of their own actions, which cigarettes tend to do. So I'm all for the dying at 60 if you smoke. But we should make that more you know, systematic. That is, if you have bad healthy behavior, you should pay higher insurance premiums, which would happen naturally in a free market. If you have, you know, if you have bad behavior, then you know your costs should go up. You should bear the burden of your bad behavior, and then we'd stop caring, which is great. Then I wouldn't worry about you because it wouldn't be coming out of my pocket. But as long as we socialize healthcare, as long as we socialize costs, we become our neighbor's watchman. We become, you know, we become interested in what our neighbor's doing because it's coming out of our pocket, so we should care. So this is my slight attack on the NHS, which I've been doing all over England to hilarious effect.
But it doesn't correspond, does it, to the trends? I mean, typically America is usually where we see the fiercest anti-smoking, and actually, at least as a movement for the last 20 years. And yet, in terms of how the healthcare system works in America, admittedly what has happened over the last 2-3 years has happened, but nevertheless over that same 20-year period, America is also known under industrialized nations by sticking to the system that it has.
But it's completely not true. So before Obamacare, let's take before Obamacare, the United States spent, every dollar spent on healthcare, 51 cents was spent by the government. So 51% of the American health system is already socialized before Obamacare. Primarily, so if you're over age 65 in the United States, where you get sick, that's the ages where you get sick, The government provides everything. It's more robust, more generous than the NHS. I mean, you guys shouldn't copy Medicare. We have, you know, when we're spending for every dollar somebody paid in taxes in Medicare, they consume $4. It's a completely nutty system in which Americans, as they get old, have all this healthcare treatment lavished on them. They're not paying the bills, so it's incredibly expensive. And it's taking America bankrupt. It's making America bankrupt. So no, we've had socialized medicine since the late 1960s. And indeed in America today, we're very concerned, and there's a huge movement about what you eat. Let's start regulating sugar. Let's start regulating fat. Let's start taxing fat and taxing sugar and taxing all these negative behaviors to your healthcare. And maybe give you a reward, by the way. The government might give you a reward if you exercise. I mean, it's coming. These things are coming because it's necessary.
There's one slight distinction though, that even if that was the case, and this is typically the standard sort of free market argument, which is to say, it's sort of non-falsifiable, because you can always find some element of government intrusion, so you pin everything on the government's interference. But even if that was the case, the thing is that people in America do not consider that that is the system that they live in. People in America for the last 20 years, even though you obviously think that yes, it is quite socialist, people in America think that they live in a free market health system. So it doesn't explain why that frenzied moral puritanism took over under your own explanation.
People understand completely how much Medicare and Medicaid are costing them. They just have an illusion, and Republicans contribute to this. So Republicans will come out and say, we are adamant opponents of socialized medicine. We have a free market healthcare system in the United States, and we're going to save it. And don't you touch Medicaid, right? So they send this mixed message that everybody knows. They don't call it socialism because America, you're not supposed to call these things this, right? Socialism is evil, but you know, Medicare is okay. Social Security is okay. Socializing particular things is okay. So what you get is this dual approach where people think it's a free market. Okay, hey, Americans thought the banking industry was unregulated when it crashed in 2008. I mean, they're pretty stupid. What can I go ignorant?
What I mean is that if they believe that it is, but
they don't.
It doesn't explain why.
I think our witness wants to pass it.
I think you've got to be careful not to argue with a position that is not sincerely held. And I think what Ian's getting at is that you had food faddists and anti-smoking zealots and temperance zealots long before you had any form of healthcare, right?
Sure.
And people will use the cost to the NHS argument as the #1 argument generally against these things. Sometimes it's smoking, they use passive smoking as the #1 argument, but that's because the smoking ban is so comprehensive, it's difficult to do that anymore. So they say, oh, it's the cost of the NHS. I don't mind. So a number of times people say, I don't mind if people want to go home and smoke themselves to death or drink themselves to death, but so long as I don't have to pay for it. But it's not a sincere argument, because I have explained what Ian explained before about the actual costs being negative of smoking because you save so much from pensions and nursing homes and all these kind of things. I've explained that literally hundreds of times. And not once has a person said, okay, I take your point, in that case people can do what they want. They go on to the next thing. And then they find another excuse to do it. On one occasion the guy said, yeah, but I still look like fat people. At least that was honest. At least we got down to the nub of what was really bothering them. You have to pass through a lot of doors of spurious objections before you actually get to the core of what's driving people's opinions. The cost to the NHS argument is almost never a sincere argument, and you can see that by looking at any healthcare system which is private, where you get exactly the same, if not the heightened sense of puritanism. And you can see that if you look 100 years ago when there was no healthcare system at all, and you had all these puritans running around them. It's not a sincere argument, and we should. I've done my best to crush it, but it just keeps popping up again and again and again. And it probably always will, because people don't want to come to terms with what's actually bothering them, because what's actually bothering them isn't particularly nice. It's rather illiterate and shows a bossy instincts which generally is still not considered acceptable in society, which is a good thing that they have to resort to these other arguments rather than come out more openly on how they feel.
I'm looking at you, Ed, if you waved your hand.
I'm just touching my face.
Okay.
Just a point I've made the same experience. Nobody ever changes their mind if you point point out the actual fiscal reality of this. This is a made-up argument. What happens here is that the difference, if you compare this to prohibition movements from 100 years ago, big difference is these movements were openly moralistic. They didn't cloak their intentions in any excuses. They were openly saying you shouldn't do this because it's immoral. Period. Nobody would say that nowadays, because nowadays you have to be non-judgmental. Job is just that most people don't really feel that way. They may say that because that's the politically correct thing to say, but few people actually feel that way, and therefore you have to make up rationalizations to yourself.
But when it comes to the syntax thing, it's just straightforward. It's very easy. If you've got 20% of the population smoking and 80% don't, it's very easy to encourage that 18% to say, well, higher taxes on tobacco. Nothing could be simpler. Alcohol taxes are slightly more controversial. The government knocks a penny off now and again to try and win favour with the sun, because most people drink. Sugar taxes, Luciano Berger, a few months ago, explicitly ruling them out because of the cost of living. If everybody's doing something, it's a bit trickier. But once you get down to minorities, yeah, it's easy. The majority loots the minority. That's what it comes down to.
Right. Great.